At 1 in the morning, several thousand auto workers walked off the line at General Motors' newest, most automated assembly plant on Earth. Behind the gates, in an overflow lot built to hold finished cars, sat hundreds of brand-new subcompacts that nobody wanted to ship. Seats slashed open, ignition keys snapped off in the locks, paint scratched down to bare metal. The car was the Chevrolet Vega, crowned Motor Trend's Car of the Year just one season earlier. Within a few years, Vegas were being scrapped so fast that some junkyards started turning them away. The Vega wasn't an outlier. It's just the worst of 10 legendarily unreliable cars this decade produced. And the real reason so many of them fell apart isn't the one you've probably heard. Some of the worst reliability disasters of the whole decade weren't just badly designed. They were assembled by workers who'd stopped caring whether the car survived the parking lot. To understand why an entire decade of cars fell apart, you need the 5 years before it. In October 1973, an Arab oil embargo nearly quadrupled the price of crude in a matter of months. A car-buying public that had spent 20 years falling for big V8s suddenly wanted something smaller and cheaper to run. Fast. At the exact same time, new emissions and safety rules forced engineers to bolt catalytic converters, smog pumps, and reinforced bumpers onto platforms never designed to carry them. Horsepower cratered. Insurers even added surcharges for anything with a big engine. By 1975, Detroit was posting its worst sales year in over a decade. Across the Atlantic, it was worse. Britain's largest automaker, British Leyland, was so close to collapse that its own government nationalized it in 1975, while strikes cost its factories hundreds of millions of pounds in lost production. 2 of the 10 cars on this list were actually crowned Car of the Year, the same year they came out. Number 10. The AMC Gremlin. Legend has it, design chief Dick Teague sketched the car on an air sickness bag on a flight. And it kind of shows. AMC chopped the tail off its Hornet sedan, called it all new, and launched it, fittingly, on April Fool's Day, 1970. By most accounts, the Gremlin wasn't a mechanical disaster. It just felt like one, built down to a price with materials so thin that cheap became the car's entire personality. Number 9. The Ford Pinto. Ford's answer to the Vega carried its fuel tank behind the rear axle with almost no protection in a rear-end collision. A 1977 magazine investigation revealed Ford's own cost-benefit analysis had weighed the price of lawsuits against the price of a fix, reportedly around $11 a car, and stuck with the cheaper option. Ford recalled 5 million Pintos in June 1978, but by then the damage to the car's name was permanent. Number 8. The Fiat 128 and its sporty cousin, the X1 Trenine. Fiats rusted so fast on American roads that owners joked you could hear it happening. The backronym "Fix It Again, Tony" stuck so hard that Fiat's U.S. sales collapsed from over 100,000 cars in 1975 to about 14,000 just 7 years later. In 1983, Fiat pulled out of America altogether. Number 7. The Morris Marina. British Leyland built its new budget sedan around suspension and steering hardware inherited from the 1948 Morris Minor, and it showed the moment it hit the road. A suspension flaw was serious enough that the company had to fix roughly 30,000 cars already sitting on dealer lots. And the Marina still went on to become one of Britain's best-selling cars of the decade anyway. Coming up, the steering wheel shaped like a stop sign, and the electrical company that earned a nickname involving Satan. Number 6. The Austin Allegro. British Leyland's Longbridge factory was so plagued by strikes, 523 walkouts in one stretch of the decade, led by a union convener the press nicknamed Red Robbo, that quality control barely existed. The Allegro launched with a square, quarter-inch steering wheel nobody had asked for, and a design flaw that could pop the rear window clean out if the car was jacked up wrong. Britain nicknamed it the Flying Pig. Number 5. The Jaguar XJ6 and XJ12. Gorgeous cars, wired almost entirely by one electrical supplier. Lucas Industries, nicknamed, only half as a joke, the Prince of Darkness. Because nearly every British automaker was a captive customer with nowhere else to buy switches or alternators, Lucas faced little commercial pressure to fix its notoriously unreliable parts. Headlights that dimmed at speed and wipers that quit in the rain became a running joke that outlived the company itself. Number 4. The Triumph Stag. A beautiful Italian-styled V8 Grand Tourer, undone by its own cooling system. An iron block bolted to aluminum heads, a water pump mounted so high that the smallest leak could starve it, and casting sand left inside the water passages at the factory. Financial losses at Triumph reportedly pushed the purchasing department toward a cheaper head gasket supplier, and Stag heads gained a reputation for warping in as little as 25,000 miles. Number 3. The Dodge Aspen and Plymouth Volare. Motor Trend actually crowned these twins its Car of the Year for 1976. Then came at least 8 major recalls in that first model year alone. Stalling carburetors, hood latches that wouldn't hold, brake lines that corroded from battery acid, even seat belts that could unlatch under hard braking. By 1978, Chrysler was recalling 3 million of them and their siblings in what was then the largest recall in company history. And Chrysler nearly went bankrupt in the fallout. Numbers 2 and 1 both trace back to the same rushed, cost-cut decade. But only one of them turns out to have a human story nobody puts in the spec sheet. Number 2. The Oldsmobile 350 Diesel. In 1978, hunting for a cheap answer to the fuel crisis, GM engineers converted an existing gasoline V8 into a diesel and reused the gasoline engine's head bolts to save on new tooling. The catch: diesel engines run compression up to 3 times higher than gasoline engines. Heads began lifting and bolts began snapping almost immediately. GM hadn't even installed a water separator, so contaminated fuel rusted engines out from the inside. One Oldsmobile engineer reportedly told his bosses not to release the engine and was pushed into early retirement for saying so. By some estimates, a quarter of the diesel V8s GM sold suffered major mechanical failures, and when California regulators tried to certify the engine, every single test car broke down before testing was complete. And that brings us back to number 1, and back to Lordstown. The Chevrolet Vega wasn't just badly engineered, though it was that too. Its innovative aluminum engine block was prone to warping and wearing itself out from the inside, and its rust-proofing failed so completely that Ralph Nader's Center for Auto Safety sent GM's chairman a 12-page letter describing the car as sloppily crafted, unreliable, and unsafe. But the Vega's deeper problem started on the assembly line. In 1971, GM installed a new management division at Lordstown that workers said really stood for Get Mean and Destroy. It pushed the line to 100 cars an hour, twice the industry's usual pace, giving each worker about 35 seconds on the line before the next car arrived. Absenteeism climbed past 10%. Turnover approached a third of the workforce every year. And some workers began pushing back the only way they could, letting defective cars roll past uninspected, or, in documented cases, deliberately damaging them, slashing seats, snapping keys off in locks, loosening lug nuts. By March 1972, the overflow lot was so full of unsellable cars that GM had to stop the line completely. When Lordstown's workers walked out for 22 days, the press coined a phrase for what they were watching: Lordstown